Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Seems like we lose half the congregation when the kids go into class. That's not an exaggeration, is it? Hey, Emily, how do I get rid of the keyboard on this? We're all vulnerable at many times, aren't we? It's all right. First of all, amazing music today, and Faith Tamara, thank you very much. I think that sounded the same, or if not better, than Lauren Daigle to me. Is that kind of a raspy? Is it termed raspy? A little bit of salt. It's pretty. What is it called? Soul Train. Sultry. Okay, it was awesome, and I'll tell you, growing up in a church I did, I never could have imagined coming to a place of true worship in the sense of I sit behind Alex, and I think about the open expression. And how we really deprive ourselves if we can't express that. And yet, I was just talking to a group at camp. For some of our visitors today, we have a Christian camp up in Arkansas, which I was going to mention. We've got quite a few of our kids there. And Lisa just came back from 4 weeks of volunteering. She refused to pay, which was good for us. But we have a Christian camp up there in which we pretty much host church groups and different variety of groups. And when we were there, I think our largest group was 370 people. And that's quite a monumental task when you're providing 3 meals a day, 370 people, filing through and getting them fed within just a few minutes. Anyway, it's been quite a task. We were up there the last month, and we just came back last Sunday. But we pretty much have about 50 full-time staff up there during the summer, and it's quite an ordeal. And I can't remember what train of thought I was on. But anyway, I was talking about us freely expressing in worship. And what I was telling my staff, we have devotional every morning, and I'm just still adjusting to being the boss. It's not a comfortable place. And I realize that it requires to step up, to step into. And so I find myself at times that I really cry out to God asking for wisdom and discernment, the right words, when to say them, when to shut up. But anyway, in this devotional, I was finding myself talking to the group. I said, we are a church. We're a body of believers here. And I said, the place we need to be is in a place of balance in our relationship with God. Not in the sense of what my former way of thinking, that I would describe even today, my former way of thinking, that this is a group of fanatics that are raising their hands and doing all sorts of such that I wasn't accustomed to. But there's a balance. And I said, I want to find myself in a place where I am not shamed by him, ashamed of him. But that's when someone sees me, they can see him, and that I'm not ashamed, and I can actively be living. JC, you just got me all choked up putting your hand up. But it's incredible that he's so merciful in the sense if we open ourselves up to him and truly ask him to lead us. And to walk in his ways. I want to make before I start my topic, it was no small thing a few weeks ago when David called us out for getting this camp. And quite frankly, it is at times overwhelming to think about the responsibility. And it's not just a business, it's interactive. It's interaction with people's personal lives at the camp, because these people live on site, and it's day in and day out. It's 5 to 10 o'clock at night, 5 in the morning and 10 o'clock at night, nonstop. There's some breaks in between, thankfully, but it's pretty much, it's everybody interacting together all the time. And anyway, when David was calling me out, I'll also mention that he called me out on another matter about being his brother. And I hate missed opportunities, but I thought later when he was declaring what he said about him loving me and knowing that I loved him, I felt like it was a missed opportunity of me standing and just affirming him. I think we have those opportunities oftentimes in our life that it may not even enter our minds, but it kills me when I think about it later that it didn't. And even worse, that it did and I still didn't do anything. But I will say that it really moved me. Before I begin my topic today, I want to make a declaration. If I can stop getting choked up. The topic I'm going to talk about today is certainly I'm not an expert on. In fact, the topic I'm talking about today is really where I feel deficient in. And this summer has been making me realize all the more how much more I need dependency on God. And what I'm realizing, even with this camp, with my daughter going to college this summer, my son getting married, I am desperate for wisdom and discernment. It's amazing that I pray this prayer often, prayer of Solomon, asking God to give me wisdom. And it's interesting that God really was thrilled to give Solomon the wisdom. Why? Because he wasn't asking it for himself, but he was actually asking it for the sake of leading Israel. He said, therefore, I'm not even just going to give you wisdom, I'm going to give you great wealth. Well, I don't know how good that treated him. He did have good wealth, but he also made mistakes. He was human. Interestingly, when we first acquired this camp, I had an opportunity. We had a situation with some staff that was just not working out. It was actually quite difficult. And I called a meeting because everybody was at their wits' end wanting a couple to leave because it was not working out. So I got everybody together, and lo and behold, it came over me to pray a prayer of asking God for wisdom, the wisdom of Solomon. And I'm not kidding, as we were sitting there around this table, it ended up, I didn't have to fire anybody. It was the people that actually had to go that declared they had to go. The conversation went in such a way that I did not have to make a judgment. Although I did say some things that had to be said, and I brought it to everybody's attention that these are things, they said, this was what they said. They said, we don't want to be in a place where we're not accepted, which is like anybody, one of us, we wouldn't want to be in a place we're not accepted and not received. So it came over me to just say, look, is anybody here willing to extend? It was kind of a pitiful moment, and I actually broke down, which is unusual. But I was broken up that we were at this impasse and people were not willing to give or make reconciliation. But at the same time, I said, I'm over here in Dallas and I'm armchairing this, and you guys are having to live this day in and day out. I'm really finding it pressed to make a decision here. And the decision looks like it's been made unless anybody is willing to give this another opportunity. Nobody spoke up, so I had declared, said, it looks like nobody is willing to reconcile. So it looks like you have your decision. And I was just, after that, their heads were shaking. It's like, what just happened? And I said, well, it's not so much as the boss that I don't want that. Well, it's always painful to fire somebody, to let someone go. It's never good. But I didn't even have to do that. It was decided upon. And I felt like that instant, God's hand was right there. And he provided the wisdom we needed and provided us the decision we had. Let me just read that in 1 Kings 3:9. Solomon actually directly asked him, he says, now give me wisdom and discernment so I can effectively lead this nation. And God, being so pleased with his request, promised not only to give him wisdom, but he gave him great wealth. Proverbs actually speaks of wisdom in 49 places. For instance, in Proverbs 1, verse 7, fearing the Lord is the beginning of discernment, but fools have despised wisdom and moral instruction. Chapter 2, verse 6, for the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth comes knowledge and understanding. Chapter 3, verse 13, blessed is the one who has found wisdom and the one who obtains understanding. How often do you find yourself making good decisions? You ever made any bad decisions? Just a few? Sometimes I think the worst decision is making no decision at all. We waffle, and then the moment passes. But in all things, there's a time for everything. Have you ever considered that some of the smallest decisions we make have the biggest outcome? And we probably don't see it until after, of course. But I'm thinking about the time when I had to make Andrew go to a summer camp. Can you believe that? Dad, it's 2 weeks. I don't want to be gone 2 weeks. And I said, Andrew, I don't think you understand me correctly. This is not a choice. You're going. And little did I realize that me forcing him to go to that camp is now why he's getting married August 5th. I didn't see that coming. And that's not why I sent him to camp. But if I had my druthers, I'd probably say, wait until you're a little older. But he called, it was a few months ago, and he thought he was going to get some pushback from us. And I said, really, I don't see a reason why you shouldn't get married. You've known each other for several years. Yeah, you're young. Get employed, have a job. So anyway, I'm actually very pleased with him because he started his own business and he's doing good. He's making some transitions at the same time. So anyway, we find ourselves really needing discernment and wisdom, don't we? In everything we do. Whether it's providing for our family, making sure there's peace in our own home, making sure we're loving our spouse, making sure we're not overbearing with our children. And that's the fine line right there, is children, raising children. It's difficult. We are in an age in which it seems like everybody's backed off from our kids, their kids, and allowing them to do whatever. Oh, let the children do. And I'm thinking I probably need to say this in a Southern preacher's drawl. Maybe not. Maybe. No, I won't. I'm waffling. It's just that there is a balance, even in child rearing, that we think freedom of giving them absolute freedom is the best thing. And yet I've experienced even in my own home that my children are discontent, they're misplaced, their minds are not in a good place when there's no oversight, when there's no rules. It's like, do what you want. We were at the camp this summer, and there was a baptism down by the creek, and 2 baptisms. And this pastor was trying to distribute the words, the oratory for this baptism, and there was this 4-year-old kid in front of us, but on the bank, everybody was quiet except for this little 4-year-old. And this woman, I don't know if it was his mother or what, but he was just going at it. It's like, what's going on? What's going on? What's happening? And she's saying, shh, just be quiet. And then it just kept going. And this woman was just at her wit's end, like, how is it that we can't get this 4-year-old to just be quiet? This is a problem. And yet there's a division over this among families. Oh, it's just a child. Grant me, look, I grew up in a church in which we were punished if we were to speak during church. And it was overbearing. And almost all of my friends are gone from church. Not because of that reason, but a lot of things. The hypocrisy, everything. But again, even in the child rearing, there's balance. We are desperate for wisdom and discernment. There is freedom. But if we give them carte blanche freedom that they are just so ignorant of, we're going to get what we deserve. And it's just absolute chaos. It was a shame that this guy was delivering this baptism. It was a moment for 2 people, and yet it was disrupted. And we think, well, one side will say, well, it's kid being kid. And the other side is, where's the respect? Where's the honor? Where's the dignity? Where is the child rearing? It's a difficult thing. I think even in today's politics, I grew up again with the belief that you don't get involved with politics. You don't vote. My view has changed a little bit since then, but at the same time, I've retracted that a little bit because I feel like if we don't give an answer in situations where we have a voice, then where do we stand, really? But that came to another head. A couple of years ago, I was asked by the local party, one of the political parties, to run for school board president of McKinney. And it was just when we got the camp. And I had strong reservations about it It's like, well, here's been my position on voting, and yet I'm voting, and yet I think that if we don't take interest in community, I mean, you refine it down, and we have to make decisions about even locking our doors, right? So if we lock our doors, is that lack of faith? Is that not trusting God to guard us? So to what degree do we go in the world? God just simply says, I pray not to take you out of the world, but just keep you from evil. But I also realized, as I had learned in this run for, or potential run for school board president, I went in and there was fanaticism on both sides. I couldn't believe it. Thinking that one side was standing up for conservative values. And I'll say one of the tipping points was that the controversies was the type of books that are in kids' schools right now. And it's a valid concern, because if we have a voice to say we don't want these books in our kids' school, then why wouldn't we go and address that, right? Or we sit back, well, my kids go to that school, but I'm going to trust God. I'm going to teach my kids at home, tell them not to even address those books at the place. But I went in, I even talked to the superintendent, and I found that nobody was willing to talk, neither side. I said to the superintendent, you've said that these books don't belong in the school, right? He said, absolutely not. I said, then why aren't you taking action? He said, I'm open to it. I said, what? You're the superintendent, you're open to it, but yet, anyway, I bowed out, needless to say, because I felt like there was no place where I could make a difference. But that doesn't mean that there are not other opportunities where we can make a difference. We do need to stand in the gap. We do need to stand up for what is right. We do need to let light shine through us. Politics is just another beast, but I think even in our personal lives, let's just look. I want to go through some definitions here. What is this discernment? Psalms 119, verse 66, describes it as taste. I've never heard of that before. It is the ability to make discriminating judgments, to distinguish between and recognize the moral implications of different situations and courses of action. It includes the ability to weigh up and assess the moral and spiritual status of individuals, groups, and even movements. Thus, while warning us against judgmentalism, Jesus urges us to be discerning and discriminating, lest we cast our pearls before pigs. That's in Matthew 7, 1 and 6. A remarkable example of such discernment is described in John 2, 24 to 25, and it says, Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew what was in man. This is discernment without judgmentalism. It involved our Lord's knowledge of God's word and his observation of God's ways with men. He supremely had prayed, teach me good judgment, for I believe your commandments. Doubtless his discernment grew as he experienced conflict with and victory over temptation, and as he assessed every situation in the light of God's word. In essence, discernment is learning to think God's thoughts after him, practically and spiritually. It means having a sense of how things look in God's eyes and seeing them in some measure uncovered and laid bare. I've got 4 ways in which discernment affects the way we live. Discernment acts as a means of protection, guarding us from being deceived spiritually. It protects us from being blown away by the winds of teaching that make central an element of the gospel that is peripheral, or treat a particular application of Scripture as though it were Scripture's central message. That's a little bit convoluted, isn't it? Discernment also acts as an instrument of healing when exercised in grace. Discernment and wisdom sometimes have a connotation of judgment. And who are we to judge? And yet we have to receive a situation and make a determination. Being a boss of over 50 people, 400 miles away, I have to rely on other people to have good judgment, wisdom, and discernment. I have to trust that they have that as well. I have to trust that they are followers of God. And of course, I can only rely on them in the way they can rely on me. They have to rely on me in the sense that they know that I'm God-fearing and that I'm fair. And that reciprocates, that trickles down. The fact is, we need help navigating this world. We need help deciphering problems between each other, raising our children. It gets messy when we think that other people are raising our children. Are we not offended when someone else corrects our children? We can be. We have been. Is it our place to do that? The greater crime is to go away from that and do nothing. But what we do is pretty serious in how we do it. We have no place to parent other children, but we are a body. And there's a responsibility to each other. The greater crime is that we witness this and then we go to others and talk about it. If we've recognized a problem, and I'm talking just outside of raising children, I'm talking about anything, and we go to anybody else other than the person that we've witnessed the problem, we get the picture? We're fooling ourselves. And I don't think any amount of worship is going to cover that. We need wisdom and discernment. I've decided to go ahead and talk in that preacher tone. Let me see if I can get it. The subject is freedom. There's no freedom when we're left to do whatever we want. Everybody get that? There's no freedom when we are left to do whatever we want. Everybody understand that? It's kind of being foolish, but at the same time, true freedom isn't in just doing whatever we want. We know true freedom is when we are being led by God and that we're receiving His sacrifice. But if we are walking with a freedom and then giving that freedom to our children without them recognizing the parameters or the barriers or the guidelines, we're mistaking ourselves. We're just fooling ourselves. I had a side that I was really moved by. There was a message by a minister at the camp, and I'm going to do this as an aside, but it is so crucial about our perspective of wisdom and discernment that we need for ourselves, and what our place is, what our very purpose is. Does anybody know who the greatest man born to a woman is? Justin? John the Baptist. Do you know what made him great? And it wasn't about him being great. He prepared the way for the Lord. Do you know that John the Baptist performed no miracles? Never performed a miracle, John 10:41. And his ministry was only as long as 3 to 6 months. Greatest man born by woman, performed no miracles. This pastor was giving this message in the context of us. Before we get down on ourselves from the standpoint of thinking that we're not fulfilling some great purpose, that we're not aspiring to do something great, he said, know this, he who started a work in you will finish it. If you're not doing something right now, it doesn't mean that you won't do something for him in the future. Do not give up on that fact. But you want to know what else I believe it was that made him great? Which I think applies to us. And it changes our whole demeanor. It changes our whole character. It changes our whole purpose. He says in John 3:30, he must increase. Therefore, I must decrease. We have freedom when we are living for him and for others. We have bondage when we're living for ourselves. It's never fulfilled. It's never satisfied. And the greatest freedom is living for him. Proverbs 2, verse 1 through 5. My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding. Indeed, if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Psalm 91, this is a very well-known. O God, give us the serenity to accept what cannot be changed, the courage to change what can be changed, and the wisdom to know the one from the other. We're in a desperate time for us to have wisdom and discernment. Not just for our glory, but for his glory. The greatest wisdom and discernment on this point is that we lay down our lives for him. And we live for him. And I'm just blown away that here we are in a congregation in which we have the opportunity to express that, to live it, to speak it, to lift each other up, to not tear each other down, to exhort others to great works, to not be ashamed of his name, to speak his name. I attest that God is the Father and Jesus Christ is the Son. When we go our way, does that precede us? Is that what people see when they receive us? It's a paramount task, I feel, taking on this camp, because I feel like he's given me 10 cities, and my immediate reaction is, I need to double that. And people ask, what is your mission? It's like, well, at first I said, to do his will. I don't know. I'm hoping he'll point the way. One thing I can say is that we have hired a staff, friends of mine from seminary, and we're starting a school this winter, a school of discipleship. I would invite any and all of you to come up and join us at your leisure, to be a part of it, to enjoy it. It's beautiful grounds. Friends, we need to be close to God and ask him for wisdom and discernment. He must increase. I must decrease. Does that change your whole outlook going forward? Therein lies freedom.